I started surfing when I was a young teenager, but I really started skateboarding first. And we all that lived in the San Fernando Valley didn't really have access to go to the beach as much as some of the other kids were going. And surfing was just starting to get really popular because they introduced foam boards. And prior to that, they just had balsa wood boards, which were really heavy and really hard to use. And then once they invented foam boards with resin, then surfing grew like crazy. But we were stuck in the San Fernando Valley, so we made skateboards. We made them before skateboards ever existed. We used to take our metal skates and break them in half. That you could take the screws out and break them in half, and then we'd hammer down the heel, and we'd take the parts off the front, and we'd put them on the bottom of a 2x4, and we'd go up and down all the streets all over the Granada Hills and Chatsworth, and there's a lot of orange groves around, but we found the streets to go, and we go down hills and things like that. It was a lot of fun. And then we made bigger ones where we could go tandem, where 2 and 3 of us would go down a hill together, and I got a few bumps and bruises and a lot of scabs on my knees, but I really learned to balance well with the skateboards, and then they came out with skateboards younger. My dad was so awesome. He helped me get my first surfboard, which I think I got for like $10 or something, only the nose was broken off of it. And he helped me fix it, and we put a new nose on it together and resined it ourselves. And the one thing he wanted to do, which kind of I didn't want to do, but because he was helping me with it, I let him. He wanted to put a quarter underneath the resin when it resined over, so I'd have a quarter inside my surfboard, and I was kind of embarrassed about that, but I was pretty jazzed to have my own surfboard, so I didn't have to borrow everybody's surfboards all the time. He just wanted to do his mark or something. I have no idea why he wanted to do it, but it was stuck inside my surfboard. You could see it under the resin. And I had that surfboard for about 4 or 5 months because it was pretty heavy, and it was what's waterlogged, because once it had broken and somebody had used it before I got it, water gets inside, it makes the board heavier. So I got a job when I was 15 at Ralph's Market, and I was able to buy my first surfboard that was a real surfboard that wasn't broken or anything. And I bought it from one of my friends at Chatsworth High School, and I paid him over time with my paycheck. And that was a nice board. That was called a Oli, which was really a hot board at that time. It was a nice shape. And I mostly surfed First Point at Malibu because it was pretty easy. But there was hardly any girls that surfed. There was probably only, that I know of, maybe 3 or 4 of us that used to surf at Malibu. We were the cool ones. And I had all kinds of guy friends because I was one of the only girls that surfed. And I had gone to Granada High, which was a rival school to Chatsworth High School. And Granada had its own set of surfers. It was Craig Stanford and a bunch of those guys. And then at the Chatsworth High School, I went there my next semester. And during that summer, in between the 2 semesters of going from Granada to Chatsworth, I surfed at Malibu, and I met the Hart brothers. Keith and his brother and Mark, and one of them is in the band Hart, and I surfed with them. And I met the Hilton brothers, Steve and his brother. We surfed together, and we all just hung out together. It was like a common thing that everybody had, and we were all friends with each other, although there was a lot of competition. And there was competition between Chatsworth High School and Granada High School. It's different sets of surfers, and I was lucky because I knew both sides. I knew both of them. I think I was one of the only girls that surfed other than Charlene Terusa, and she was an incredible surfer. She lived at Malibu, and she was amazing. There were some girls that surfed in Hawaii that were pretty famous, Joy Hamasaki, and we had a big contest in 1965 with Joy Hamasaki there. It was a world invitational, and it was held at Malibu, and my girlfriend Charlene won that contest. Divisions, there was guys and girls, and she won the girls heats, and she beat the top surfers in the world there. And there, because most of the really good girl surfers were in Hawaii at that time, and there wasn't very many of them. So anyway, Charlene won that year, which was really cool. Some of my friends at Chatsworth High School, the girls were into surfing, but they didn't surf. Not like the girls today. They were more less into sports. I mean, they didn't have as many sports for girls even in school, and they didn't have, you know, soccer or any of that kind of stuff that the girls do today. The girls at that time really pretty much stayed into homemaking and everything, and a few of us ventured out and did all the stuff the guys did, and I was one of them.
How did the guys...
They loved us.
They loved you?
Yes.
They didn't tease you?
No, actually, they would come and pick me up and take me. I used to go surfing with Glenn Kennedy, and, you know, if you could surf, they were cool with you. And it was funny because I had a break in between my surfing career and to have one of my kids, and then I had another one, and then went back to surfing, and there were some new surfers on the block, and when I went out there and I was surfing and they saw me, because you're a girl, the guys would immediately come over to you and ask you all kinds of questions and ask you to join this and join that. So I joined Malibu Surfing Association, and I did some contests there. I was also part of the Pacific Sea Surfing Association, which is another one, but Malibu used to be so much fun when we were younger because it wasn't limited like it is today. And in a way I feel bad for the kids today because a lot of the enjoyment has been so regulated. Well, we used to be able to go there, and if the surf was up, and I did this when I was 16. My mom was really cool. She trusted me, and we used to go, and we had station wagons, and we would sleep in the back of the station wagons at night. You could sleep over in the parking lot. You didn't get in trouble. No police came. Nobody was doing anything, you know, radical. And we would be in the water when the sun was coming up, without wetsuits, in the winter. And we used to be able to make fires right on the beach. It wasn't like drinking and at that time, marijuana was around a little bit, but it was not out in the open, and not a lot. If you did it, you didn't do it in front of everybody. There really wasn't a lot of partying. It was mostly we smoked cigarettes. It was cool to smoke a cigarette. And we made the fires, and we'd sit around the fires, and we could cook food if we wanted to, and we would put all our surfboards all lined up on the wall like you see the old time pictures, and we used to share boards, and it was like a little subculture, and there was people like Mike Sprock was a geologist, and you know, there's people there with amazing careers, you know, older people, younger people, but everybody got along, and you know, there were groupies, you know, we all hung around together and had a lot of fun. We would go, usually at different beaches, there's what's called locals, and there still is today. Like people surf Silver Strand, and they surf Malibu, and they surf Upper or Lower Mondos, or Rincon, or going all the way up Santa Cruz and down to San Diego. And it's their territory when it's the locals, and you know, if the waves are really good, a lot of times they don't like outsiders to come in. And so Malibu had its locals, and all the different, you know, beaches had their locals. And what we would do sometimes as a club, like Pacific Surfing Association, we would go together and then go to a spot and kind of be all together. That would be a planned weekend, and we'd go to like 3 or 4 beaches and camp. And we did that. And then, but mostly, I think at that time what a lot of the surfers did was have a beach that they belonged to pretty much, and they'd, you know, pretty much surf there. And I can safely say that mine were Topanga, Rincon, and Malibu, because they were all similar beach breaks, which I liked better. I did surf at Huntington, Newport, Doheny. I've surfed in Hawaii a little bit. Taught myself. Playa del Rey, which is a really hard beach break. And I went out one day because my boyfriend went out. This is when I was 14. I did have a little boyfriend then. He was a year older, and he's so cute. Anyway, it was like a surfer dude, you know. He gave me to go steady a little Christopher medal. That's what everybody had, was Christopher medal. It's on a chain, and it's a round medal that usually has a turquoise center. Turquoise was the surfer color at that time with olive green. But it's a St. Christopher medal, and it was just something that a lot of surfers wore at the time. And Murphy was our mascot from Surfer Magazine. He was a cartoon character that everybody knew who Murphy was. Oh yeah, everybody read Surfer Magazine. Yeah, they liked it. Usually it was the really top surfers like Mickey Dora and some of them, but I think his name was Buzzy Sedfin or whatever. He won the invitationals in '65 at Malibu, and he was in the magazines. Charlene was in the magazines, but we all read him all the time. It was a lifestyle, surfing at that time. I mean, you wore the right clothes for surfing. They only had, one piece and bikini bathing suits then. They didn't have the board shorts like they have now. And they didn't have board shorts for girls or baggies. And so we made our own board shorts and baggies. And we made little wax pockets on the back to put our waxes. We'd wax the boards by hand. And sometimes we would hot wax them. And that's where you take your wax and you put it in a pan and you put it over the fire and let it get hot, and then you pour it on the board. But you'd always have wax on you so that you didn't slip. So we made our own stuff. Pretty much we just wore like something warm, like sweats and stuff like that when it was cold outside. We wore jeans, and the lower cut the better. Like they were like really low, hip huggers. And sometime we went into the bell bottoms, hip hugger bell bottoms, and we always wore crop tops, so there was a space from underneath here to down. It was pretty wide, but that was really popular. The girls ran around like that a lot. Low hip huggers and a crop top. A-line skirts. We wore A-line skirts because we weren't allowed to wear pants at that time to school. And we wore tennis shoes that were Converse tennis shoes or Purcells. We wore Purcells. And mostly the colors were like pink and olive green, but the turquoise and olive green were really popular. So there was a whole theme that went with the surfing. I mean, you knew who was a surfer and you knew who was a greaser at the time. Okay. The greasers were the low riders that had their cars lowered and they cruised and they had their music loud and they would never go to the beach and they never saw the sun, and they were the dudes that were the tough guys. The greasers and the surfers did not get along. They were different, completely different, and there was the greasers at school and the surfers at school. Two completely different cultures of people. So it was just what you decided to be in.
What about the people in between?
I don't know much about them because they weren't my friends. They were the nerds. But then it eventually turned into the hippies later, the ones that turned into hippies. We used to part it on the side, and we put peroxide in it, and we would put lemon in it in the sun so it would get really light, and we would comb it over like that with a big, straight gold barrette right here, and then down. You get out in that water, and you feel like you're on vacation for a week. I would get up in the morning. When I had my job at Ralph's, I ran a snack bar. And I used to get up in the morning, go surfing when the sun came up, and I'd be at my job at 9 o'clock. I surfed after school and before work, and then if I had to work on Saturday and Sunday, I surfed before work in the morning. They were smaller than they are now, and you'd have the judges and everything, and you'd have what's called a heat. And a lot of it was if you were lucky enough to be able to get a good wave, because they're timed, and you could sit out there and get no waves, or little ones, or have a good set come through, and it depended on where you were when the sets came in. I surfed for Malibu Surfing Association. I surfed for them, We used to have our meetings at the library over there, and I don't even know if they still are around. They could be around.
Did any of those people or your friends, or especially the girls that won or got in the magazine, did they get endorsements? Was that even a thing?
You know, I don't remember that. I don't think they may have gotten little ones, but it's nothing like it is today. These kids today get to ride for, they get paid, you know, they get on television. It's like, we were the ones that kind of pioneered the whole thing for them today, you know. It wasn't, we were still a little bit frowned upon as, you know, not as accepted as it is today. I feel really lucky that I got a chance to grow up at that time and really be a part of all that. And I know we were at part of the center of it just because we were in Southern California in Malibu, you know. I remember one summer that I had to go to vacation to Wisconsin for a month, and I was like, oh my God, am I going to make it through? Because I was a Valley girl too, you know. That a whole month without the ocean? And then I learned to water ski on the Mississippi River, so that kind of was fun. But we went to Racine, Wisconsin, and they had these little teeny waves there, and I was so jazzed because I got to be at the waves there, you know. Part was fun. There wasn't really a lot of surfing happening around like there is now. It was mainly in Hawaii. I don't know what other countries, like maybe Australia or something, but at that time it was still a beginning new sport, and I don't think there was much on the East Coast. It was mostly, it really was strong in Southern California. I think that I'm a feminist to a point, but not how you would talk about it with some of the people that are real feminists today. I think there's always opportunity for women if they take it. And I've never found personally that in the things that I've tried to do that men have tried to hold me back. I found a lot of support with a lot of them. And I think it's up to a woman to go do the things, go try them, and to believe in herself and have fun at it while she's doing it. And not to look for everybody's approval. That's a key. We would surf in 66 degrees and 67 degrees in the wintertime without a wetsuit. In the summertime, though, I would stay out, 10 hours, 8 hours. Come in and get something to eat and go back out. The Beach Boys were like the band at the time. The Beatles were really popular too, but not with the surfers. The Beach Boys were our band. They did our songs. And my friends had a 409, the car that the song was about, and she's real fine, my 409. I remember all that stuff. It was neat being a girl doing it because there was hardly any that did. I surfed up until about 9 years ago. Well, I saw shortboards, wetsuits come in, which were neat. When I was first surfing, the boards were like 40, 45 pounds, which is pretty heavy. And you didn't want to put a leash. The leashes weren't on those because you'd probably pull your leg off if it got caught in the white water and it's, really heavy, and they shoot up in the air and all that. They changed the skeg, it's called, or a fin, some people would call it. Originally they were stationary in the board. They didn't move, and you couldn't change fins. A lot of times if the water was low at a beach break like Malibu, and the tide was out and the rocks were pretty high, you could actually hit them with your skeg on the rocks, and boom, you'd go flying because, it's pretty shallow. First surfboard that I got brand new, was my third board, and I still have it today and I love it. In fact, I'll still go surfing when I get an opportunity. But it was made by Greg Little, who used to shape for Yater Spoon. And Yater was famous for what's called the Yater Spoon, where it had a bigger a spoon-like front on the front of the board so that you could walk and hang 10 on the front of the board. And then they came out with the Maury Doyle boards that are all foam that you could bang your head on and not hurt yourself, and they're perfect for beginner surfers, which would have been awesome if they had it when I first started. The guns are the semi-guns, and those are the really big, tall boards. They're 10 feet and bigger, and those are the ones they ride the big waves with, and they were riding the big waves with in Hawaii. And when the surf gets really big, they're more stable. Those guys used to paddle out to those big waves. And now somebody takes them out on a wave runner. So there's a lot of new tricks out there now that they didn't have. Those guys that used to go surf those big waves were really brave. The biggest I ever surfed was about 8 or 9 feet. And when they talk about an 8 or 9 foot wave, they're not talking about the face of the wave. The face of the wave can be 12. They're talking about the water and the wave on the backside. Say this is the shore, and it's where the wave comes up. It's the backside of the wave that's being measured. The beach break, you never know where the waves are going to come in. So you can be sitting in a spot, and all of a sudden you look, and there's an outside set coming in, and you've got to paddle like hell to get over it. And if you don't get over it, you're stuck on the inside, getting through, because there's usually maybe 5 that come in a row, and you've got to get through all 5 of them with the white water, and you're exhausted by the time that happens. So you don't want to be, it's being caught inside, you don't want that. And that's Huntington, that's Newport. There's a lot of our Zuma is a beach break. Point breaks are ones that are on a point of land, and they always break in the same spot. They might be bigger, they might be littler, but they're consistent where they come, and so you can like work around them. You can paddle around and come around them, and if a big set comes, you know what you can do, because there's no surprises. It's more consistent. So I liked it better because your arms get tired, especially if you're in big waves. It's a little scary when it's a big wave and you're like at Huntington in a big wave. Scary. It can take you under for a while if you're not in the right spot. It was just awesome. It was so much fun. It was when you're out there in the ocean and you're on your board, and you could have a lot of people around you, and you sometimes feel like there's nobody around, and you're just in this really peaceful environment, and it's really relaxing. You could have a really tough week at work, and you go out and you start paddling, and all the stress goes away, just gone. Because I think it's the physical combined with really being in nature. I wouldn't have gone out with anybody unless they were a surfer. So, yeah, definitely surfing was part of the relationship. But my high school boyfriend was ended up being my husband, and we surfed together for a long time. We taught all our kids how to surf. I got called the Snake as a nickname because I used to cut people off and get in front of them and go down the wave. But it was a good wave, so I never pushed anybody out of my way. Mickey Dora pushed me out of his way a couple times. That happened to me a couple times. He was a character. He was a very famous surfer, and owned Malibu when I started surfing. And you did not cut off Mickey Dora unless you wanted to end up upside down in the water. And I think I did that a couple times, and once he reached down and grabbed my board and pushed me right out of the wave. This is when my kids were little and they were surfing, and they'd go, "Your mom's the Snake out there. She's taking all the good waves." Guys who pretended to surf, ho-dads. They weren't real surfers, but they would get a convertible or a Woody car, the Woody, and they would put a really cool surfboard, and they would drive around with their hair bleached, and they would tell everybody they surfed, but we knew who the ho-dads were. All the surfers would merge on Balboa Island. They would just shut it down, just completely shut it down in Newport Beach. And there was people hanging out of every window, every door, every car, everywhere. One of the guys I surfed with, a close friend of mine, Glenn Ryan, his uncle was Richard Nixon, so I knew more about that. But Glenn was kind of cool because he was a greaser and a surfer. He was a lot of fun. He actually took me to see the Doors at the Hollywood Bowl. Yeah. I think the guys were pretty nice to the girls. They were actually protective, and because there wasn't that many girls that surfed, and they were real supportive. And they were polite. Like if you lost your board, that means if you were surfing and you lost your board because if you didn't have a leash, because they didn't have leashes then, they would actually get your board and sometimes partway bring it out to you and stuff like that. It wasn't competitive when I was doing it because there was nobody to be competitive with. But, you know, girls are competitive, so I'm sure there's some competition going on. They're very talented. I've seen some of the things I've seen them do. A lot of them ride short boards. Not very many of them ride long boards that I've seen. But they're amazing, that the things that they can do on waves now, and they're hot. I mean, they're way better than we were, you know. But we were pretty good. We had a contest where we did the tandem surfing, and the guys have a really big board, and they're really the ones that do all the work. You just help paddle, and you have to balance good, and then you stand up with them, and then sometimes they'll put you up in the air, and you're like a swan out there. But that was a lot of fun. I did that. I really enjoyed that. I like to surf tandem. You know, we were pretty graceful. I mean, we knew when the wave was ending. That's what's good about a point break, is you can see what's going on. But we would, you know, just sit down and go back out, paddle again. And you lay on your stomach and paddle, and they're right behind you paddling, and you mostly belly paddle. I didn't belly paddle, I knee paddled. It's where you're, you know, on your knees. And I got the surfer knots and the volcanoes and the bumps on my hair, and all came out. You could tell that's how we would know who was a hodad too. Because if they didn't have surfer knots, they were a hodad. You couldn't fake being a surfer because you had bumps right here. And if a big wave is coming at you, you get on your belly to get through it, because it makes you, you know, narrower. And a lot of times you would flip your board over and go underneath it, to go underneath the white water if it was a pretty good sized wave. To catch a wave, I like to knee paddle, because you're up higher and you can see more what's going around. You know, you can see better, you have better visibility, and you're already part way up. And if you're catching a wave and you don't get up quick enough, your board does what's called a purl, where the nose goes in the water and it gets stuck, and you're not going anywhere. That's where you go in there and your board goes out the back end. So when you're already knee paddling, you've already a step ahead of it, and you're less likely to purl, is what it's called. On a short board, you can only belly paddle. You can't knee paddle on a short board because it's not big enough. So it's hard work, short boards. You're paddling harder to catch a wave. And the one thing that's nice about a shortboard, because I have done it a little bit and my kids had shortboards, is you can catch a wave at a more critical spot. By that, I mean it could be already breaking and you can catch it without purling. When you're surfing with a longboard, chances are you have to catch it before it starts breaking, or you're going to purl, unless you're really good and really fast. But I watched a lot of companies develop, like Rip Curl and O'Neill, and Ocean Pacific was really popular. It came around in that time. So a lot of companies developed around surfing. A lot of the guys who were surfing, pretty intelligent guys, and they created businesses around surfing because there wasn't really any. And then Roxy and all the stuff you see today. But no, but I think it was pretty cool that we made that we surfed without wetsuits, and we made our own skateboards. That was pretty awesome. And my mom and dad used to yell at me all the time that I was going to break my neck. I waited till I was much older to break my first bone. And it was not doing anything with sports. So yeah. Nope, I never broke anything. We're sitting on your surfboard. If you didn't have your baggies on, the guys would hang around you longer. You know, when you're straddling your surfboard, and they come up and go, hi, but they're not looking at your eyes, looking at your crotch to see if they can see something. But yeah, some of the guys would do that, but not the ones that knew you. We used to actually make them from scratch. We used to actually sew them and put a little tie in the front and put pockets on the back. We made them ourselves completely. We used to get out the sewing machine and make them out of just fabric. Yeah. Sometimes we would do cut off, like Levi's. You had to wear Levi's. You couldn't wear it. There was nothing but Levi's at that time. I mean, if you wore any other kind of jeans, there was something wrong with you. It had to be Levi's. We used to have parties between the guys' clubs and the girls' clubs, you know, the gents and the Alblons, and, you know, they would make out in the back of the cars and the back, stuff like that. They did. My mom and dad used to go bowling every Wednesday night. So the kids in the neighborhood, almost all surfers, used to know when my parents would go and they'd all come over. Well, my dad figured it out, and one time we had about probably 30 kids at our house. And we weren't doing anything but hanging out, really. That's it. Some people would drink a little bit, but not much. And my dad came home, just opened the door and walked through the middle of the living room, acted like he belonged at the party. Didn't say a word, and my sister and I were going, oh my gosh. And then he never said anything to us. He just left, and then we never had another party again after that. We used to have some parties at the beach, but no wild stuff, really. Really, if somebody smoked grass, it was underground. It was not out in the open, because it was really against the law. I mean, you went to jail. So, this wasn't. A few years later, in the late 60s, 70s, and that when Haight-Ashbury and hippies and all that happened, that was a whole different movement away from surfing, and that's when the drugs came out a lot more than when we were younger. I mean, you went to jail. If you had a joint, you went to jail. You didn't have to be a dealer or anything. If you just had possession, you were in jail for at least a weekend. It cost a lot of money to get out. That happened to my boyfriend once. He was gone for the weekend, and I didn't even know he was smoking it. I had no idea that he went to jail on his 18th birthday. So what happened to him? But, so, he wasn't so clever as he thought he was. So, yeah. But it wasn't real popular. It grew, and it grew in a good way, but it got a lot more commercial. And then, you can't park at the beach, and you can't stay overnight, and no fires on the beach, and all those regulations started happening. That's one thing I liked about Newport today, is that you could still have a fire on the beach. It's in a specific area, but still. It's just like roasting a marshmallow and hanging around a campfire with your friends, having a beer at the beach, And a lot of that stuff was really fun, and it's kind of sad that it's not happening anymore. Because it was good fun. It wasn't trouble. It was a good place for the kids to go. And it was a special time. Always keep your board pointed. Never have it sideways to where a wave can take it. You always want it pointed out to sea or into land. Never sideways, because if a wave comes, it hits the whole side of the board and it takes you with it. We used to not know that the sun caused cancer. So we used to take baby oil and iodine and mix them together, or cocoa butter, and be so tan that you couldn't see our moles. I have moles, my brown moles. I was that dark. It was like so dark. You wanted to be super tan. And then I'm going, oh my, that's amazing I'm here. Because we were out in the sun all the time. And, my nose would peel constantly. Just peel. We would wear zinc on our noses too sometimes because it was just too much. A few little things, but not much. Just older skin.
For 65. It's amazing. You do not look 65.
One thing I noticed that's happening now that wasn't happening, we did not have sharks all around like they have now. And people are saying, oh, well, you just didn't see them. We would have seen them. We were out there all the time. And they were not out there.
Never
like
any shark attacks?
Nope. And we had dolphins come around sometimes. In fact, one time when I was at Silver Strand, I was sitting out in the water on my board, and these dolphins came right up to me, and they let me pet the top of them. They were so neat. It was amazing. But, yeah, we never had sharks. That would scare me today too much, because they're right out at Topanga Beach in Malibu, and I don't know why that is. And people go, they always, we didn't have them. They were not out there like that. Never saw one. And I surfed for years, days on end, and we never saw one. Never saw anybody get attacked by a shark. Maybe up at Santa Cruz, we all knew the sharks were up there, but not by us. I did teach surfing for a little while, but that was later, you know.
Would you have been a professional surfer if that was a thing?
For sure. Yeah, I would have. I would have tried to do more. We were like the hub, Malibu. That's why it's so famous. What a neat time for me to be able to grow up there too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Not even know that we were like cool.
Did you know any of the guys from Endless Summer? The movie?
I remember watching it. I knew Tim Curran and, you know, but the people that we also surfed in Santa Barbara at Hope Ranch with Glenn Kennedy. Had a key to get in there. He's a pretty famous guy, Glenn Kennedy. A lot of people who surf know who he is. When I first started surfing, there was not hardly any girls, but in the 70s they started surfing. There was more. There'd be like 6 or 7 of us that were locals at Malibu. But when I first started, there wasn't.
Did you become friends with them?
A little bit. You know, if they were in the same club or whatever. But I think once you had your group of friends like Mike Sprock and Tony and Wayne, and we just kind of hung together and we'd all sit together. We owned Malibu. My group, our people, we owned Malibu. We were it. The other girl that surfed with me, her name was Sue Haramia, and she and I are the ones that made the board shorts together. And she ended up moving to Newport Beach, and then I used to go hang with her and spend the weekends at Newport. And that's when I surfed at Newport, was because she lived there. But I never really liked it as much, because it was freaking scary sometimes. You know. There's the times when you're like going to get air and you hit the sand and you go, oh shit, I gotta go the other way. And you're like almost out of air and you're going, why am I doing this? And then you come up and you're like, oh cool. Yeah, it was like really athletic. I mean, I played tetherball and dodgeball, and I roller skated, and, you know, played ice hockey, and I was like, that's what I did. We wanted to go like to Panga Plaza, and I lived in Northridge. We would skateboard all the way over there. But then, you know, when you get boyfriends that have cars, you didn't have to. That's the purpose for having a boyfriend. He had to have a car.